Zach, let's turn our attention a little bit more to returners for 2024. I want to know who the vocal leaders are that you are seeing out there. I know that Shamar James and Derek Wingo are both in non-contact jerseys, but word on the street is that they have been pretty loud and really out front there in leading this team. And obviously that's something Florida really critically needs if they're going to improve from last season to this season.
Yeah, that's one thing that Billy, along with harping on the veteran team that he has, with veterans comes leadership. And he
Mhm.
also likes where the leadership is at with this team. You mentioned Derek and Shamar, that they certainly kind of set the tone at the linebacker spot, especially Derek. I think he's the leader of that group. And then, I would say probably the team captains, if you had to pick two,
Mhm.
would be Graham Mertz and Justice Boone. Billy Napier called Justice Boone one of his favorite players that he's ever coached. And it was a gut punch to the team last year when he suffered a season-ending injury.
Yeah.
And I truly believe that he would have made a difference on defense. They would have had a better sack total, probably more tackles for loss, and just would have got after the quarterback had he not gotten hurt. So not only is his return significant from a production standpoint, but also from a leadership standpoint. Like, he is the heart and soul probably of that defense. And to have his voice out there on the field again, even if he is in a non-contact jersey and his knee is in a brace, that's still a big deal. Graham is one of those guys that is part of that, setting that tone. I think Montrell Johnson, now as a senior running back, he's led the Gators in rushing the last 2 years. He no longer has Trevor Etienne part of that room, so he is kind of the guy. He and Cam Carroll again.
Yeah.
Cam Carroll is a guy that we've never seen in a Florida uniform on the field, and yet
Yeah.
coaches and players all point to him as one of the leaders on the team.
Yeah.
And he's a 6-year senior, so that's kind of what you would expect. I think Austin Barber, even though he's another guy in non-contact, all the leaders are in non-contact jerseys, including Graham. But Austin Barber, he's also a guy that, even though he's kind of sidelined this spring, he's still going out there in workouts and participating in some parts of practice. But he's kind of the leader of that O line group, the vocal guy of that O line group, that they've really kind of leaned on. So those are some of the guys that stand out. I would imagine Asa Turner is probably going to fit that bill. I haven't seen or heard enough of him yet. They've only had two practices, but I just have to imagine, as a 6-year senior starting in the secondary at safety, calling out coverages and stuff, he's going to have to be a guy that's vocal back there.
Okay, so we have some returning pieces to an offensive line that really was a weak spot for Florida last year, but I'm hoping that having some veterans on that line can really kind of help Florida take a step in the right direction. We talk about having Graham Mertz, we talk about having Montrell Johnson and Cam Carroll and all, and some of these guys back, but does it matter if the offensive line can't do a better job blocking for them?
No, it won't. And I think that that's something that Billy knew going into the offseason that they had to address, not just the guard position, which is something that we focused on a lot or talked about. But I think the tackle position, they viewed as much of an issue, if not
Mhm.
more, coming out of last season. Because when Austin Barber got hurt for the last two games, it became pretty apparent that the depth there was just not what it needed to be, which is why they went out and signed two offensive tackles in Brendan Cranshaw Dixon and Devin Manuel. And these were two of the top transfers available in the portal at the
Yeah.
position. Now, they weren't, their grades weren't off the charts according to PFF, but for the Gators to go out and get those two, those were two of the best that were available. And especially Brandon Crenshaw Dixon. Like, he's the guy that I view that will start opposite Austin Barber. Whether he's on the left side or the right side, I think is still to be determined.
Yeah.
But they feel like he will be an upgrade from Damian George, who has now moved inside and is now playing the guard position. That's a spot that he's got a little bit of experience in at the past
Yeah.
at Alabama. And Billy feels like that's going to be a good move for him. That's going to be a good move for them. He still is in the process of adjusting to that spot in terms of, I think, physically, he
Mhm.
needs to get stronger. He's added some weight,
Yeah.
But that's something that he's got to hone in on this spring, making that switch. And then obviously Jake Slaughter, he's the one that you feel good about on the offensive line. He graded out as one of the best interior linemen that's returning for 2024 according to PFF. So at least that's one thing
Yeah.
that you can kind of hang your hat on, is having him as that center. And that quarterback center relationship is very key. And the fact that he and Graham got to establish that last season, that can't be overstated. But yeah, they got to figure out who lines up where at the offensive tackle spots, what that depth chart looks like, and then, like, I think they know who their starting five is going to be, especially with the interior, with George making the move and Najee Harris from IMG Academy kind of stepping into a starting role as a sophomore.
Yeah.
Is he ready for that?
Mhm.
That's something that remains to be seen. But he
Yeah.
played in every game last year. He got one start under his belt. So I think that they know what the answers are on the offensive line. But if that leads to better results, that's what we got to wait and find out.
Okay, so this is a question that I think a lot of Gator fans are wondering. Who is going to be our wide receiver two? So we know Trey Wilson is going to shore up that number one spot for us, but who is going to step into the role that he played last year?
Yeah, I mean, I've I've gotten on my coworker Nick on the podcast about this a couple times, because I don't think Khalil Jackson gets enough respect on
Yeah.
his name, and I know that he's not a dynamic receiver per se, or a guy that's a sexy name, but it's pretty clear watching wide receiver drills that um, I mean, he's the leader of the pack. I wouldn't call him wide receiver one,
Hmm.
but like he is the example that goes first in every drill, and they want everybody to watch and follow. So, a guy that was a sure-handed receiver last year,
Yeah.
maybe he's not the most dynamic, like I said, but to me, you have two starters at wide receiver in Trey Wilson and Khalil Jackson. I think the biggest question is who's wide receiver three,
Yeah.
and then who's 4 and 5, and are those 3, 4, 5 options, are they weapons? Are they guys that can make a difference? Are they guys that can, get you first downs, get you touchdowns in the red zone, break some plays in space? I think, like, I know what Florida's going to get in Trey Wilson, and I know what they're going to get in
Hmm.
Khalil Jackson.
Yeah.
Outside of that, I don't know. So I do want to give K Jack his props, because I thought he made some plays last year that was like, okay, I can see why they
Every
put
time
this
he
guy on
touched the ball, it
scholarship.
was a play. Like he didn't, there was
Yeah,
no easy balls thrown his way the whole season.
yeah, but I mean, he is a former walk on, so
Yeah.
like, I don't know if that, like, he's just not a name that just moves the needle for fans like a Trey Wilson. So I get it, but just, I'm telling fans from watching him in practice, like, he is a guy that the staff looks to as someone that they're counting on. So
Well,
I think,
as a third generation, he moves the needle for me because the
yes.
club there is very, very small. So, uh,
And look, I think it's now or never for Jaquavion Frazier's and Marcus Burke. Like,
yeah,
I look at them, they seem to be kind of the guys in that second team rotation,
yeah,
getting a lot of passes from Graham Mertz, getting a lot of passes from DJ Lagway. Marcus Burke had a really, really good offseason in terms of transforming his body.
yeah.
Let me pull up the numbers from the story that I put out the other day, because it was pretty impressive to see some of the work that he's put in. Now, how does that translate to the field? I don't think that that's the only determination of what his role is going to look like in 2024. But the guy lost 10 pounds of body fat, and he gained, where was he at? Or excuse me, he lost 7 pounds. So he's down to 193. So pretty impressive what he's
Yeah.
done in just 2 months of the offseason program. I kind of view him as maybe potentially that wide receiver three.
Mhm.
Um, and then if not, like, one of the young guns is going to have to step up,
Okay.
whether that's Andy Jean, Aiden Mizell, Tank Hawkins.
Yeah.
I think Andy Jean is probably the one of that next tier that could push Burke and Frazier's if they don't take that jump.
Yeah.
Um, but that's kind of how I view the room right now.
What about back to the defensive side of the ball, what are you seeing communication wise with the defense? That seemed to be something, we thought was going to improve when we had a DB coach for the room as opposed to safeties and corners. And it kind of seemed like there was not great communication last year through the unit as a whole. Is that something that you think is going to improve this year?
You would hope so because of Asa Turner.
Hmm.
I think especially on the back end, some of the communication issues there, or missed assignments, blown coverages. you know, do you chalk some of that up to the youth in the secondary? They weren't completely young. Like they
Sure.
obviously had Jason Marshall and
Right.
Jaden Hill, but they had some freshmen back there, and freshman mistakes happen.
Mhm.
So I think that has to get better. But look, also let's talk about Ron Roberts. Like I think his addition and his role on this defense is to eliminate some of those things that you're talking about, and whether that's player to player, coach to player, wherever those breakdowns are happening, he's kind of coming in to help Austin Armstrong and this defensive staff identify those weaknesses, address them so they don't keep happening. But I do think you can chalk some of those issues up to youth, but some of it is they just need to get better. They need to execute better. They need guys to step into those starting roles and perform better. And whether that's Pup Howard, Asa Turner, we'll see who steps up at star. I think it's going to be Aaron Gates, but like those guys need to be on top of their game. And I think that the working relationship of Ron Roberts and Austin Armstrong coming up with game plans, coming up with installs, having an extra set of eyes on the product, that should bode well. And we'll see what that looks like in the spring game.
Well, Zach, this was awesome. Thank you so much for joining me. I completely appreciate it. Tell everybody where they can check out your work.
Yes, you guys can go to gatorsonline.com to read me, Nick, Corey, and Keith. Obviously, this is a busy time of year with spring football, recruiting visits happening. March Madness is coming up, so I'll be covering the NCAA tournament for the first time. So I'm looking forward to that. So definitely encourage you guys to come check out our site. If you're not subscribed already, you can just do get in the door for $1 to check out all of our work, and it'll be worth your time.
All right. Well, we appreciate you. Have a great day.
Appreciate it, Allie. Thanks for having me.
Thanks.